In Minneapolis, a bizarre attack on Ilhan Omar ignites national headlines, just as her bank disclosures leap from $42 to millions of dollars, and Minnesota's governor vows to quit amid sudden federal scrutiny. The political fallout here is not just opportunistic, it conceals deeper stakes, money trails, and a pattern that neither side wants exposed. How did we get from town hall chaos to a crisis tearing through the heart of Democratic power? Federal investigators in Minnesota have split their scrutiny along two separate tracks. One focused on allegations of obstruction of federal law enforcement, the other on sprawling nonprofit fraud schemes that have siphoned millions from government programs. The Department of Justice has confirmed ongoing probes into the misuse of public funds by organizations linked to the Somali community, with dozens of indictments already filed in cases stretching back several years. Prosecutors have zeroed in on how certain nonprofit networks originally set up to deliver social services allegedly funneled taxpayer money through shell entities and kickback arrangements, with state officials accused of turning a blind eye. At the same time, a parallel line of inquiry examines whether political leaders interfered with or delayed federal enforcement actions, especially as tensions rose between local officials and federal agencies over immigration raids and deportation orders. The timeline is tight. Within 2 days of news breaking about the latest federal actions, Governor Tim Walz publicly declared he would not seek elected office again, a move that raised eyebrows given the mounting legal questions swirling around his administration. DOJ press releases have outlined a pattern of coordinated raids and subpoenas targeting both nonprofit operators and officials with oversight authority. The pressure is not abstract. Federal defense attorneys in Minnesota routinely charge between $1,000 and $2,000 per hour, and the financial stakes for anyone caught up in these probes can quickly become overwhelming. For Walz and others, the convergence of criminal investigations and political fallout has become impossible to ignore. Legal jeopardy extends well beyond headline-grabbing incidents, reaching deep into the machinery of state government and the networks that have long shaped Minnesota's political landscape. Legal defense in federal investigations comes with a staggering price tag. In Minnesota, experienced attorneys handling complex white-collar cases routinely bill between $1,000 and $2,000 per hour. For a public official facing multiple lines of inquiry, the cost of assembling a qualified legal team quickly climbs into the hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars depending on the length and scope of the case. Federal billing surveys confirm that even preliminary defense work, like document review and initial strategy sessions, can consume tens of thousands of dollars before a single court appearance. The pressure to cover these expenses is immediate. In high-profile cases, attorneys require substantial retainers up front, often equal to several months of salary for most Americans. Facing this kind of financial exposure, even a sitting governor with reported savings between $15,000 and $50,000 would find personal resources depleted almost instantly. The math is unyielding. At a median rate of $1,500 an hour, just 20 hours of legal work, less than 3 days, can wipe out a client's entire savings. For anyone under federal scrutiny, the looming threat is not just legal, but financial. The need to secure funding for a full defense becomes as urgent as the investigation itself. This economic reality shapes every strategic decision, from media statements to behind-the-scenes negotiations, and forces political figures to confront the practical limits of their own support networks. The intersection of legal peril and financial strain is where the stakes become unmistakably personal. House financial disclosure forms operate on a system of broad value ranges rather than precise dollar amounts. When members of Congress file their annual reports, they list assets and liabilities in categories, sometimes as wide as $1 to $5 million, or $5 to $25 million. This system, outlined in the House Ethics Manual, means the public can see only the band into which a holding falls, not the exact figure. For most filers, these ranges change gradually year over year. But in Ilhan Omar's case, the leap is dramatic. Her 2023 disclosure placed her household assets somewhere between $40,000 and $250,000. The following year, her report lists total assets jumping to a range between $6 million and $30 million. That is not a small uptick. It is a move across multiple reporting bands, each representing millions of dollars. The structure of these forms makes it nearly impossible to pinpoint the true size of the increase, but the minimum possible value alone signals a life-changing shift. The jump is not explained by congressional salary, which remains under $200,000 a year. Instead, the forms cite interests in a winery and a venture capital firm as the main sources. Yet the forms provide no documentation, no business names, no production records, no third-party valuations. This lack of detail is not unique to Omar, but it becomes especially important when the numbers move so suddenly and so steeply. Understanding how these disclosures work and where they leave gaps is essential for anyone trying to make sense of the story behind the numbers. Questions began piling up as soon as Ilhan Omar's financial disclosure named a winery as the main source of her sudden wealth. Minnesota's business registry contains no trace of a winery under her name or any known associate. State alcohol licensing records, which list every producer, distributor, and wholesaler, show no permit ever issued to an Omar-affiliated operation. Tax filings and property records in Hennepin and Ramsey counties are equally silent. No vineyard, no facility, no commercial property is linked to her or her family. Even the federal disclosures, though they cite the winery as a key asset, provide no business name, no address, and no third-party valuation. Online, the trail is just as cold. Domain searches for plausible winery names, including omarwines.com and ilhanwinery.com, return nothing. The Wayback Machine, which archives millions of web pages, has no captures of any such site before or after the date Omar's assets were reported to have soared. There is no evidence of a scrub, no archived pages, no deleted domains, no DNS records pointing to a vanished business. The absence of basic documentation stands out. Wineries are among the most regulated businesses in Minnesota, requiring public licenses, regular filings, and inspection reports. None exist for Omar. In cases where sudden wealth appears without a visible paper trail, investigators often flag the timeline for further scrutiny. The comparison to the Jussie Smollett case is not presented as proof, but as a caution. When the story, the timing, and the missing records raise more questions than answers, the warning signs become impossible to ignore. Senator Chuck Schumer's words echoed through the congressional record. He said the federal government has become a force of thuggery, a warning aimed not at rivals, but at enforcement agencies under his own party's control. Representative Pramila Jayapal, speaking before a packed committee room, went further and declared that Democrats must dismantle DHS, ICE, and CBP the moment they return to power. These agencies were created in the aftermath of September 11th to prevent terror attacks, yet they are now openly targeted by Democratic leadership as obstacles to their vision of democracy. On cable news, CNN's Abby Phillip delivered a swift verdict after the Omar town hall. She said, "Trump is responsible for the vitriol." Her tone shifted when covering real assassination attempts against Trump, when she cautioned against blame and partisanship. As these statements circulated, both Tim Walz and Ilhan Omar's teams blasted out fundraising emails. Walz solicited donations to cover mounting legal fees. Omar's campaign invoked the attack as proof of urgent need for security funding. The response was immediate, coordinated, and lucrative. California's governor authorized millions in taxpayer funds for legal aid to undocumented immigrants, while expanding state health coverage to over 1.7 million people living in the country illegally. Minneapolis's mayor publicly vowed to withhold city cooperation from federal immigration enforcement, and even promised financial support to residents resisting deportation. Official records show that while Texas accounts for nearly a quarter of all ICE arrests, citizen fatalities during enforcement have occurred only in Democratic strongholds like Minnesota. Protests in these areas have turned violent, with documented attacks on officers, including bricks thrown, fingers bitten, and chants calling for harm. The story of Alex Prey, once presented as a peaceful nurse killed by ICE, later unraveled as evidence surfaced of his involvement in violent confrontations. That exposed how quickly facts can shift beneath political narratives. Today, the boundaries between political crisis, media narrative, and fundraising blur more than ever. When power and perception collide, facts risk becoming casualties. The stakes aren't just for one career, they are for the public's trust. In this landscape, Vigilance isn't optional, it's essential.